Skade are a fascinating anomaly in the landscape of CSGO. They are the youngest team in the HLTV Top 30, coming in at only 20 years old on average. Their oldest player turns 22 in November, but he's the de facto veteran on a team of basically teenagers. The team is led by shipz, who is most known for being the MVP of WESG 2018, which he attended with Windigo Gaming. This is quite a change for a player who was known as a really explosive, promising fragger, transitioning into a leadership role at quite an early age. None of the other players on the roster have quite the same profile as shipz, yet it's quite apparent that their rise from 51st in February to 24th in April is a team effort. Instead of focusing on any one player, I'll be talking about the entire roster. They are all young and really quite promising players. They are Skade, I'm T, and this is Prospects. When I first looked into this team, it was with a focus on shipz and rainwaker. These two play the most starring roles alongside dennyslaw, who takes the AWP. The way shipz and rainwaker play is, well, slightly baffling sometimes. Rainwaker often lurks and anchors, while shipz is more typically involved with aggressive map control maneuvers, playmaking, being a very active player. The confusion for me arises when late round, after a slow default taking map control, it's often rainwaker who actually joins the execute, while shipz goes hunting for rotators and attempts to close out rounds. This makes it a little difficult to just call either one the closer or either one the lurker, because they kind of interchange their roles depending on where the execution happens and what shipz feels like calling. Duplicate and Oxygen are the team's workhorses, playing the anchoring roles on the CT side, whilst also being the first ones taking contact on T side. Duplicate and Oxygen work excellently as a tandem, with Duplicate creating space and Oxygen making the most of it. If you look at them as an entry duo or as a map-taking duo, it is Duplicate who is usually slightly further forward. The way shipz interplays with these two often looks like he's supervising them, throwing flashes and following up with impact plays off the back of the space they take. Finally, dennyslaw's AWP takes him all over the place. It's his responsibility to take opening fights, as well as lock down specific choke points. Whilst dennyslaw isn't maybe as fast or as explosive as his compatriot Cirque and Poison, he makes up for it by really having solid fundamentals, taking the right picks, and, working well within the team's system. He is also more than serviceable with a pistol or a rifle. Yes, this is a requirement for all modern AWPers, but it's still something he excels at relative to his competition. Oxygen's headshot percentage almost speaks for itself, as he really has that aim of a young star. On pistol rounds, Oxygen is often the man to watch, his crisp aim making for quite satisfying highlights. Duplicate has a face only a mother could love, which explains why he's so willing to smash it straight into whatever brick wall his opponents have erected. He dies a fair amount, but Duplicate's courage and selflessness are what allow guys like shipz and dennyslaw to bask in glory. Duplicate also does have the skill to win rounds when the opportunities present themselves, making him quite impactful for a player who ostensibly plays a supporting role on the team. Rainwaker is a strange fellow to watch play Counter-Strike. At such a young age, he seems to have an incredibly well-developed sense of spatial awareness, constantly finding his kills through smokes, and putting himself in favourable positions to find multi-kills. Finally, the hardest skill set to really define here, well, to explain, is shipz. He's the in-game leader, and the way he plays is often interlinked with the way the team is playing. shipz puts himself wherever he believes he can win the round. He then often wins rounds using his combination of aim, spray, and, well, game sense to pick up multi-kills. It is impossible though to talk about shipz' skill set without talking about his calling and his reads. His sense for when a CT side has over-rotated is unnerving, especially against the tier 2 and 3 opponents that skade shit on week in, week out. The T-side skade play has a clear structure and a well set out plan of how they're going to create advantages to exploit. A lot of skade's map wins come down to their methodical T-side, including masterclass demolition jobs against alternate attacks on Mirage, and a 12-3 assault of Azako Boar's Pride on Inferno. Skade's T-side begins with a whole lot of defaults. Rainwaker often lurks, holding for pushes and gathering information, playing second mid on Inferno, connector on Overpass, and apartments in Mirage. I'd almost say he's sometimes too passive, but it's effective at catching out one-off plays from force buying CTs, which is quite an issue in the current meta. The rest of the team is a little more varied from map to map. For example, whilst Duplicate takes map control on Inferno and Overpass in a more aggressive capacity, on Mirage he often plays more passive, holding Palace in much the same way that Rainwaker holds apartments. Oxygen is almost always a part of the aggressive maneuver crew, either trading Duplicate or setting up ships. One of the more interesting players to watch, at least for me on T-side, has been dennyslaw. He has a nice variety to his positions that he takes on the team's defaults. He plays some standard lines, looking for mid picks on Mirage, but also throws in some more interesting and aggressive lines, like peeking into B-side Overpass from short. This is something I found lacking in Hades' Overpass demo that I took a look at a short while ago, though I'm uncertain if that's on the individual or on the team strategy. shipz' position on T-side also has a great deal of variety, but it's more based on what type of early round plays are being run. The one thing connecting all of shipz' positions is that he'll always be where the action is, either throwing utility or fighting. On Mirage default rounds around mid, shipz is one of the 3 guys taking control, usually being the more aggressive of the 3 as dennyslaw and Oxygen hold off their, standard angles as he looks for kills. One interesting play they like to run to take map control on Overpass is a 3-man connector contact play, which to me seems wild. They have a 3-man unit slowly moving up the tunnel, including the AWPer, who's just scoped in the entire time. It looks incredibly strange, but it's just a symptom of this incredibly careful, methodical style they have on T-side to never take too many risks. This very methodical, very careful style can also be seen in other maps, where you'll rarely see one man make a play by himself. You watch other teams like Team Spirit, where you'll often see one-up plays pretty aggressively made. skade are permanently in 2s at minimum, and the only players who are on their own are playing as far back as possible while still holding on to the position. Once map control has been established, it's time to execute. Executes aren't usually that complicated to talk about. It's a bunch of nades being thrown, then followed by a bunch of bodies. skade, however, love to throw in elaborate fakes to try and gain the upper hand. This is one of the more notable examples where they send 3 players up the A ramp on Mirage, including the bomb with a bunch of utility, just to turn around and regroup towards B and execute there. The audacity to commit the bomb that deep onto A whilst not actually being committed to an A play just makes me chuckle, to be honest. It is also quite a common thing to see skade make a beeline towards the opposite site midway through an execute, or as an execute's fading out and it's a 2v2. In order to allow for this to happen, they don't do the Na'Vi thing where they execute with 10 seconds left very often. There's usually at least 30 to 40 seconds when they go for their executes, allowing for shipz to make that instinctive call to just switch it up at the last second. The founding principle of skade's CT side is Oxygen and Duplicate are really your anchors. dennyslaw, shipz and Rainwaker move around the map looking for information and control and changing up the look. The clearest place to see this is on Mirage. The star trio rotate around the bomb sites in mid, playing stairs for shipz, playing short with Rainwaker, and dennyslaw playing whatever combination of window or connector or on ticket. In contrast, Overpass might be the furthest thing from Mirage that doesn't have 2 distinct levels when it comes to maps, so they play that quite differently. As with other teams, their closer, in this case Rainwaker primarily on the CT side, plays somewhere alongside the AWPer dennyslaw. On the other side, the heavy-hitting rifler, aka shipz, plays alongside 2 more supportive riflers. He throws utility to allow Duplicate and or Oxygen to find information and get into aggressive positions, then reacts accordingly, either trading or rotating to A. The most common example of this is shipz throwing this flash over and over again, allowing Oxygen to get into position on the other side of the monster tunnel and drop his anchor. While shipz and Rainwaker kind of play the same-ish role on the CT side, both are the rotator of their respective bomb sites, both are the ones who will typically look for little pieces of map control around the mids. They do play it very differently. shipz loves to take fights, loves to be constantly aggressing, whilst Rainwaker likes to stay alive as long as possible. The best way to explain it is that shipz is the wildcard, creating chaos and taking fights, whilst rainwaker's the janitor, slowly making his way around the map, mopping up ship's mess. This brings me onto my biggest gripe with shipz. It's most notable on CT side, but there are elements of this that come into the T side. This guy is a beast, alright, with a ceiling in the exosphere, but he plays like nobody else on the team is capable of clicking the left mouse button. His overextensions when looking for more frags and more kills on the multi-kill often lead to unnecessary deaths, including deaths that lead almost directly to round losses. There is nothing more frustrating than your playmaker gets 2 kills, puts you on a 5v3, your team's up 15-14, all you have to do is let the T's plant and just win the retake. Oh no, fuck, he peeked for another kill. Overall, skade's CT side is their weaker side, but the cause of this is, well, it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly. I want to blame shipz calling, you know, the way he calls on himself all the time, the way he overextends a lot, gets too aggressive. But it's not just that causing problems. On a decent number of their CT rounds, it feels like they aren't trading effectively, especially once the round is no longer a 5v5. Maybe it's a comms issue, or maybe it's a problem with the system and the structure being too inelastic for everyone who's not named shipz. I digress. That's the only real glaring problem the team has right now. And, well, aside from inexperience, but talking about that won't change the passage of time, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Their T-sides are often masterful, and a lot of the credit goes to the players, but there's also Punisher, the coach, who clearly has had a very big influence on this team. This is a side whose oldest player is only 21, but can go toe-to-toe with literally anyone outside of the top 15, and are favourites going in to any game against anyone outside the top 30. Prior to me recording this video, Skade had won 17 best of 3s in a row. They have since then, I started writing, started recording, and they lost a bunch of best of 3s in back-to-back days, the 2 toughest days on their schedule in a long time, but still, prior to that previous loss, which was to Mouse Sports, they'd won 16 straight best of 3s. So Skade have had an incredible year, and honestly, it only looks like it's going to get better. Bulgarian Counter-Strike has had a number of impressive overachieving teams. If you think about the past, the Wendigo lineup that he played on, if you go even further back, the E-Frag side who kept upsetting Fnatic back in the day. Sure, online, but hey, that's everything now, so why not use it as a comparison? The style of play seems to be quite similar to those old, you know, less skilled Bulgarian rosters, yet this team has the players to really raise that ceiling. These teams are always capped by the top 20, essentially. They never really broke into it. Skade feel like the team that are finally going to really push and start competing amongst the top 10. Might not be this month, might not be this year, but in the future, expect to see a whole lot more of Skade. Okay, well, that's the video. It took me a while to make because I had to do a lot more, well, stuff. I'm not just reviewing one player, I was reviewing 5. Trying to get my thoughts together on all 5 of them at once whilst watching the same 3 demos. Kind of tough. I had to watch a lot of extra content just to make sure what I was seeing wasn't just a one-off or me kidding myself. You know, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, leave a comment telling me your thoughts on Skade. If you think they have the same really high potential that I do, sub if you want to see more content. And yeah, that's all for this one. Goodbye.